April 13, 1973, Kraków, Poland. A tomb sealed since 1492 is breached. A team of experts initiates a routine assessment. They are prepared for history, not the air. The environment inside is stagnant, isolated, a pocket of air trapped for 4 centuries. This tomb belonged to Casimir IV, one of Europe's most powerful rulers. Yet within the decade, multiple members of this team would be dead. A string of fatalities that quickly became linked to the tomb. As the seal broke, something entered the air. A concentrated plume of long-dormant particulates. The researchers breathe it in, unaware of what has survived inside. A silent, invisible interaction begins. Every surface is colonized by an ancient growth. The public reaction is immediate and visceral. The label curse is applied with haste. It serves to obscure the clinical reality. The mystery is buried under layers of folklore. They call it a supernatural price for entry, but the evidence suggests a different origin. We reject the ghost story format here. We do not look for spirits in the stone. The history is contained within the biology. We are here to autopsy the cold evidence. We seek to differentiate myth from hazard. The evidence points toward a logical explanation. The tomb contains something far more dangerous than folklore. It was a threat hidden for 500 years. Was this truly a royal vengeance from the past, or were they victims of a biological disaster? We begin the forensic dissection. The truth is in the primary source. We start by analyzing the unseen cargo.
Qui aperit sepulcrum regis, maledictionem inveniet.
Following the incident, the inquiry shifted from site to sample. Biologist Bolesław Smyk was tasked with an autopsy of the tomb. The objective was to identify any microscopic markers present. The initial analysis focused on the tomb's organic remnants. Textiles meant to preserve the king served as a potential host. The team identified traces of Aspergillus flavus. This mold appears to have thrived within the tomb's environment. It suggests a localized environment favorable to fungal growth. In the isolation of the tomb, the organism had found a niche. The question remained, did this contribute to the team's health? The team worked at a time when such hazards were less understood. A royal grave had become a site of scientific scrutiny. Smyk's report proposed that prolonged exposure was a factor. These particles are capable of bypassing some physical defenses. Researchers later suggested a potential link to systemic illness. But a biological explanation does not answer every anomaly. Folklore provided a convenient explanation for a clinical crisis. The public preferred a curse. Science suggested a contagion. Smyk's findings offered an alternative to the curse narrative, a meticulous catalog of the tomb's actual conditions. The report moved the focus from vengeance to biology. Yet why were only specific individuals affected? The timing of the fatalities remains a point of investigation. We must examine the tomb's unique environmental design. The structural layout may hold the key, an enclosure designed to hold, but also to trap. The humidity levels created a persistent incubator. Small variables, significant biological consequences. 5 centuries of isolation ended in minutes. A breach occurred long before standard protocols evolved. Was fungus alone enough to explain the aftermath? Or did we underestimate the tomb's own anatomy? We now turn to the structural traps of Wawel. To understand the contagion, we must reconstruct the environment. The tomb functioned as an isolated containment vessel. Its sealed masonry significantly limited external air exchange. Humidity likely permeated the walls over centuries. These conditions may have created an environment favorable to mold. Organic materials inside likely served as a nutrient base. The interior air mass remained largely undisturbed until 1973. Opening the tomb abruptly exposed this interior to modern air. The sudden intake of oxygen likely altered the chamber's chemistry. A plume of long-dormant matter was released into the workspace. The breach served as a catalyst for a localized hazard. The team was exposed to these materials without modern safeguards. Exposure was likely significant, but the outcomes were inconsistent. We must acknowledge not every team member fell ill. Forensic data shows that susceptibility varied greatly. Researchers later proposed that individual health played a role. The deaths occurred over years, complicating a direct link. Skeptics at the time debated the causality of the contagion. Smyk's report suggests the spores were a contributing factor, yet science requires more than correlation to define the cause. If this were a uniform curse, the effects would be consistent. Instead, we see a localized incident with complex variables. The evidence points toward environmental exposure. However, we have yet to resolve the psychological mystery. Why did the myth of the curse persist so effectively? We have mapped the agent, but not the human reaction. The legend survived despite the forensic evidence. We must analyze how legends adapt to clinical findings. Myths are often a bridge for human uncertainty. Smyk's findings were documented, yet the story changed. Why did the public reject the logic of the report? The clinical reality was far less compelling than the myth. Science answers the what, but myth answers the why. We are left with unanswered questions regarding the fatalities. Now we examine why we prioritize the myth over the evidence.
Science offers a sequence of events. Myth offers a narrative. Scientific findings struggled to compete with a narrative that felt more meaningful. The human brain naturally constructs connections during a crisis. Media amplification provided the necessary framework for the legend. The curse narrative spread far beyond the limits of the scientific report. The timeline of events became heavily simplified in public discussions. Every subsequent health event was retroactively mapped onto the tomb opening. When another researcher fell ill months later, papers immediately linked it to the crypt. The reporting focused heavily on the historical parallels to Tutankhamun. This structural alignment with previous legends gave the story instant familiarity. Smyk issued statements regarding the mold, but the documentation was dense. The legend quickly established itself as a distinct historical layer. Letters to local editors showed a population deeply moved by the tragedy. The archival record survived, though it rarely attracted the same attention. The powerful legacy of the Jagiellonian dynasty heightened the drama. Stories emerged claiming the researchers had seen a mist upon opening, yet the official logs recorded nothing unusual during the initial breach. The geography of the site itself encouraged an atmosphere of mystery. Within months, international journals were repeating the supernatural angle. One history is physical, the other is social. Both histories tell us something significant about the event. The persistence of the mix speaks to our discomfort with accidental mortality. A dramatic explanation often fills a void faster than technical analysis. In the absence of simple answers, the public relied on legacy lore. The tomb remains a monument to both historical power and biological reality. Visitors today encounter a space shaped equally by science and rumor. We have examined the physical hazards of the site. We have analyzed how the human narrative adapted to the crisis. The case of Casimir IV bridges two distinct eras of inquiry. Our final task is to look at the legacy of this intersection. The closing analysis brings us back to the primary source. The incident at Wawel Cathedral altered the methodology of archaeological assessments. What was viewed as a routine historical procedure in 1973 is now approached with biological scrutiny. Today, teams prioritize air quality analysis before entering enclosed heritage spaces. The evolution of field protocols reflects a broader, more rigorous approach to site safety. Every ancient enclosure is now assessed as a potential complex ecosystem. The findings in the Smyk report remain a primary reference point in archival risk management. Many of the hazards discussed in that report are now anticipated during excavations. Controlled environments are now standard to prevent uncontrolled exposure. Containment is maintained by establishing baseline environmental controls. The clinical reality has reshaped how we interact with the physical past. We have learned to respect the preservation conditions of historic masonry. King Casimir IV Jagiellon ruled a vast, complex medieval empire. His historical significance remains documented within the state archives, but his unexpected legacy was the accidental preservation of an ancient ecosystem.
a physical reality that remained undisturbed for 481 years. The intersection of medieval history and forensic science occurred in a single breath. The events of 1973 represent a sobering chapter in archaeological methodology. Their experiences contributed to a growing awareness of biological risk in archaeology. The archive remains accessible for those who seek the documented path. The legend survives alongside the evidence. In the final analysis, the tomb tells a strictly material story. It is a record written in masonry, moisture, and spores. The truth does not require the supernatural to maintain its weight. It only requires a commitment to the objective record. The archive remains open. The interpretation continues. The remains of the king rest in silence once again. The data remains for those who know how to read it.
The file is complete.